Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would commentate on the most recent Wimbledon match that ended up happening. And for those of you, of course, that did not end up hearing the news, Mr. Novak Djokovic, who, of course, I believe was the favorite to win the Wimbledon tournament this year, and he was the favorite also by me as well. I did favor him to win it because Novak Djokovic, I believe there was a statistic about him not losing on that of center court within that of the past 10 years, or some sort of a statistic. He also, I believe, had won four straight Wimbledons in a row. So Novak Djokovic, of course, he was the favorite to win it all, but to some people's surprise, including my own, not major surprise, but a slight surprise, Mr. Carlos Alcaraz, who of course is the new 20-year-old on the map, was able to beat Novak Djokovic in probably one of the greatest tennis matches that I've personally ever seen. And of course, for those of you that did not end up watching the game, it was truly a great display, not only of all around skill on both sides, but especially by Carlos Alcaraz, not only of just a great degree of skill, but a great degree of grit and confidence and heart. And that's what you really need in order to beat someone like that of a Novak Djokovic. And pretty much what this symbolizes to me, at least in my view, is pretty much the saying known as the changing of the guard. Novak Djokovic is 36 years old. I thought that at the beginning of the year, even at the Australian Open, it looked to me as if maybe he had lost a half step as a player, just in terms of athleticism. Now, his athleticism is still there to a certain degree, and I think that, he's still one of the top two best players in the world. And don't get me twisted, don't get it wrong. I'm not using that as an excuse to why Novak Djokovic lost this match. He had a multitude of opportunities to win this match in that of the tiebreak in the second set, and he also had break points in that of the fifth set as well that he did not take advantage of. So unfortunately for Novak Djokovic anyway, he was not able to pull it out because of a multitude of mistakes. A lot of the times within this match, he was not able to hit his backhand consistently. A lot of the times it was going right into the net, and a lot of the times it looked like he was confused by that of the tempo of Carlos Alcaraz. And I think the reason for that being is pretty much what Novak Djokovic said that after the match, which is that he had personally never seen a player like that of Carlos Alcaraz before. And I would have to somewhat agree. Of course, a lot of people, they would compare that of Carlos Alcaraz to that of a Rafael Nadal. I think that he has a little bit of Rafael Nadal and also a little bit of Novak Djokovic in him. But I think what surprised Novak Djokovic really so much is that a lot of the times Novak Djokovic, even when he tends to be a little bit off against other players, even sometimes against Roger Federer or Rafael Nadal or other great players, a lot of the times, even when he's not hitting winners, just eventually the volleys are enough to the point to where he'll pretty much let you beat yourself and he'll let you get in your head mentally. He'll let you put too much pressure upon yourself. Carlos Alcaraz, and that's a big part of the reason why I have to give him so much credit for this match, especially the fact that it went 5 sets, because he did not get within his own head. There was a couple of times, of course, where maybe he didn't do as well as what he could have done. But Carlos Alcaraz, once again, if this were another opponent, any other player in the world, Novak Djokovic in that fifth set probably would have clammed down and took over. And a couple of times he almost did. But Carlos Alcaraz's serve was just way too good in this match. His returning was way too good in this match, and he hit way more winners, at least from what I remember, than that of Novak Djokovic. He was just a better all-around player in this match, and even had Novak Djokovic won this match in that of the fifth set, all around it did look like Carlos Alcaraz was that of the better player. And that's why I have to give him a lot of credit. In my personal view, just my view, now of course, this may be a little bit, early to say this because Novak Djokovic, he is 36 years old, and of course Carlos Alcaraz, he's pretty new to the table. But Carlos Alcaraz might be debatably the most all-around talented player that Novak Djokovic has ever debatably played in his career, at least debatably. As Novak Djokovic said after that, Carlos Alcaraz, he's a completely different type of player than what he's ever played before. And I think that's why Novak Djokovic had such a problem with him. Because once again, a lot of the times Novak Djokovic, he'll let you beat yourself, even sometimes if the winners aren't enough, or if he's not hitting winners, the defense and that of the rallies will eventually be enough to break you down. He'll usually outwear you when it comes down to it. He will have more wherewithal than you. He'll have more fortitude, both physically and mentally. but Carlos Alcaraz showed the mind and the heart of a champion. And that's what you have to show in order to beat a champion, not just the heart, but also the intelligence and the fact that, you're going to show them that you're not afraid of these guys, that you have to confront that of Novak Djokovic. And that's the difference between Carlos Alcaraz and a lot of these kids and a lot of these guys that face Novak Djokovic. They don't truly believe that in a tiebreak or in a lot of these close matches that they're going to beat that of Novak Djokovic, whether it's Stefanos Tsitsipas, Daniel Medvedev, Dominic Thiem, or a lot of these other guys. And that's truly what separates that of Carlos Alcaraz. Not only that, but there's just certain shots that Carlos Alcaraz was able to hit that I don't think Djokovic has ever really seen anyone else in his career be able to hit. I mean, that one shot that Carlos Alcaraz can hit when he's on the right side of the court and he's actually able to hit it with the forehand, when the ball is to his right shoulder, when he's going to the right, and he's able to hit it completely across court to the complete other left side of the court. That's a shot that is very hard to pull off because, just the angle and just the amount of power, you would pretty much need the exact right hit. And Carlos Alcaraz, when he's on fire, he's on fire. And he can hit those type of shots. He has a great drop shot. He has a great forehand. He has a great backhand. Just my personal opinion, if we were going to compare him to Nadal, I think that Carlos Alcaraz, of course, he can be greater than Nadal at this current moment in time, or Federer when it comes down to it, because, of course, he doesn't have the accomplishments, and we need to see what he does further on later on down the line. But just in my personal view, Carlos Alcaraz, with what I see, he's more skilled, or at least just from this match alone, he's more skilled than what Rafael Nadal ever was in my personal view. Better backhands, in my view. When it comes down to it, better returning, better serve, better volleys, better anticipation of where the ball is going to be. And that's why, in my opinion, he was able to be the second man to beat Djokovic within that of a Wimbledon final when it came down to it. So very much congratulations to that of Carlos Alcaraz. Now, if there was one criticism that I would say about, let's say, Novak Djokovic, for example, about what do I think he could have done better. Well, his first serve definitely was off within this game. His backhand did not seem as strong. But I kind of give, some of those points because Alcaraz, he was returning in such great fashion and power. And it was very hard because he had such a nuance to his offense that it was really hard for Novak Djokovic to predict where the ball was going to go, which is very hard to do that against Djokovic because he's usually an expert in returning that of certain shots. So it certainly was great that Alcaraz was able to have a great amount of nuance overall and also have great anticipation of where the ball was going to go. And that's a big part of the reason why Djokovic was having such a problem, because Novak Djokovic was saying, this dude, he's doing the same thing that I've been doing to people over for the past 10 plus years. And for the first time in 10 plus years, Novak Djokovic, it's very clear that he's going to be competing probably for that number one spot, him and Carlos Alcaraz. But I think it's also clear that for the first time in 10 plus years that Novak Djokovic is not the definitive number one pound for pound guy in the sport. Right now, it would have to be Carlos Alcaraz. And once again, that's why I say it is a changing of the guard, because Carlos Alcaraz showed that he could compete with Novak Djokovic in terms of skill. He showed that he can compete with him in terms of will. And that's what you need to do in order to beat those all-time great champions. But in my view, the main faults of Novak Djokovic in this game were he did not have a great first serve the majority of the time. That led to a certain amount of break points going in the favor of Carlos Alcaraz. That usually is a great advantage for Novak Djokovic on both hard court and grass. Unfortunately for him, he did not have it today when it came down to it. On top of that, the backhands were hitting a lot of the times into the net. But once again, I attribute that to the great returning of Carlos Alcaraz, and that probably had Djokovic a little bit off his tempo. So I'm not really going to say that that was completely just because Djokovic was off. But if there was another thing, I would say, in my view, Djokovic, he was just way too passive in the game. I think a lot of the times he was trying to let Carlos Alcaraz beat himself. And if you're going to beat a player like that in Novak Djokovic or Carlos Alcaraz, or even Rafael Nadal or Roger Federer, if you're going to be an all-time great player, you can't let them completely beat themselves, because a lot of the times it ain't going to happen that way, especially with such a great player, either like that of Carlos Alcaraz or Novak Djokovic. But I think that Carlos Alcaraz was much better than what Novak Djokovic expected. I think Novak Djokovic expected Carlos Alcaraz to win, I think he expected him maybe to win one set when it came down to it. I think Djokovic probably thought that he was going to win this within probably about 4 sets. I think he thought that Carlos Alcaraz would be a little bit too limited on grass, and he figured wrong. He figured out that Carlos Alcaraz, that he is the next great player, and that even on grass, he is a huge threat. So once again, we'll see overall where it happens later on in the future. But it was an amazing match for a multitude of reasons, not only because Novak Djokovic, in my view, was the best grass court player of his era, and Carlos Alcaraz has now been only the second man to beat him in a Wimbledon final. Now, certain people will say, what are you talking about? Roger Federer was the best grass court player of his day. He has more Wimbledon titles and he has a higher percentage there. And that's great, but at the end of the day, a big part of the reason why that also is because Roger Federer was really playing in an era when he was winning the majority of those Wimbledon titles. Out of his 8 titles, he won the 6 of them in the 2000s, when there really was not any super duper great grass court players or really any huge challengers to the throne, especially on that grass court. But by the time that the 2010s hit, when it came to Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic, and even Martin Cilic, I believe, and a couple of other ones, Roger Federer only won 2 Grand Slams on that surface. On top of that, Novak Djokovic won 3 out of their 4 matchups, I believe, at the Wimbledon, and Roger Federer was never able to beat Djokovic in a final in the Wimbledon. So in my view, it was always Djokovic who was the better player on grass. If you were to argue Roger Federer, I would understand it, but I think that his statistics are a little bit skewed because of the amount of players that he played in the 2000s. I think had you had peak Djokovic there and peak Andy Murray and some other ones, that Djokovic would probably have that of the higher percentage. But I understand their point. Anyways, once again, congratulations to that of Carlos Alcaraz. This is a huge win for his career. And this could very much mean, the advantage potentially in the head-to-head statistics against Mr. Novak Djokovic for that of the next few remaining years. I expect Novak Djokovic to probably be around maybe for anywhere from 2 to 4 more years. But it's clear in my view that he is waning a little bit as an athletic player. His athleticism is still mainly there when it comes down to it, but it's a little bit overall like that. If I were going to compare it, I'm trying to think. It would almost kind of be like LeBron James with his first or second year with that of the LA Lakers. His athleticism is still there, but you can tell that he's about a half level of what he was when he was at his peak. So once again, we'll see what happens. That can still be very good enough to win a Grand Slam, especially if Alcaraz is not in his way for a particular Grand Slam. Do I still believe that Djokovic will win more Grand Slams? I think that more than likely he will. I think that more than likely he'll win anywhere from 2, maybe 4 more Grand Slams, probably anywhere from 2 to 3 more. Who knows? Maybe he'll never win one again, but I assume more than likely he'll win a couple more, but we'll see what happens. You just never know. But as for now, it is very clear that Alcaraz, that he is the new number 1 guy. He is the new main face of the league, and until proven otherwise, Alcaraz, in my view, he deservingly remains at that number 1 pound-for-pound spot, which once again is a true changing of the guard because that hasn't happened with Novak Djokovic for really in about 12 years. So great job for Mr. Carlos Alcaraz. An amazing match. Great show of skill, all-around talent, all-around will, and all-around heart, and great fortitude, especially mentally. I have to give him a lot of credit because it is not easy to go into a 5th set and get a break point against the great Novak Djokovic. But that pretty much is about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that. Very interesting match indeed. And like I said, Djokovic, I think even he was surprised about Carlos Alcaraz because even he did not believe some of the shots that Carlos Alcaraz was able to hit against him. So great job with Mr. Carlos Alcaraz. He was even able to get as good as what Djokovic gave, or he was able to give just as much as what Djokovic gave. And that's how you beat an all-time great champion. That's what happens always with the changing of the guard. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, they eventually saw it with Michael Jordan. NFL players eventually saw it with that of Tom Brady when it came down to it. And now the NFL is seeing that with Patrick Mahomes. Basketball is now seeing that with Nikola Jokic and a couple of other players when it comes down to it. And this generation right now, it is going through a completely new transition for pretty much every sport. Whether it be boxing, MMA, tennis, basketball, football. This is a new generation. They are pretty much preparing themselves for the next 20 years. So, we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.